Welcome and thank you for participating in this session focused on a faculty member's role in ensuring an accessible learning environment that not only benefits students with disabilities, but contributes to the achievement of learning outcomes for all students. Stockton University is committed to ensuring compliance with all laws and regulations related to accommodations for students with disabilities. Faculty have an important responsibility in designing learning environments, providing student accommodations, and offering students accessible documents and course materials, including the use of captioned video. Stockton faculty have digital tools and colleagues with knowledge to assist and guide efforts to provide accessible learning opportunities. This professional development session allows faculty members to consider how the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as ADA, and other regulations apply to teaching at Stockton. We ask you to relax and focus for the next 30 minutes on learning about how academic accommodations for students. When you complete this training, it is anticipated that you will have increased skills and confidence in accessing and using resources at Stockton, as well as knowledge to implement appropriate teaching practices related to course accessibility and student accommodations. Participation in this session will allow you to describe how the Americans with Disabilities Act applies to teaching at Stockton University. Our session objectives are as follows. Identify responsibilities to provide students with academic accommodations. Describe how students receive documented accommodations. Evaluate student scenarios related to the Americans with Disabilities Act. And identify teaching practices and campus resources to improve accessibility.
Let's review how the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, applies to teaching at Stockton University. As an institution of higher education, Stockton University has a legal responsibility to provide access and accommodations to students with documented disabilities. Additionally, the New Jersey law against discrimination prohibits disability discrimination, meaning one may not treat persons with disabilities differently from non-disabled persons. To treat people differently is termed disparate treatment. Another form of disability discrimination is failing to provide reasonable accommodations. The operative word here is reasonable, which is determined through an interactive process between the student, faculty, and the Learning Access Program. At Stockton, the Learning Access Program assists students with disabilities in the reasonable accommodation process and provides support for faculty. Stockton has its own policy prohibiting discrimination, which may be reviewed by clicking on the resources link posted on the Stockton webpage used to access this video. Laws and regulations related to accessibility focus on the important concept of reasonable accommodation. So, what is a reasonable accommodation? A reasonable accommodation is defined as any modification or adjustment to a job, the work environment, or an academic program that enables a qualified applicant, employee, or student with a disability to participate in the application process, to perform essential job functions, or to learn in a program. Faculty are required to make reasonable modifications or adjustments to a course to meet the needs of students with disabilities. For example, a student with a disability may require the reasonable accommodation of extra time for test taking. This accommodation does not fundamentally alter the test or create an undue burden. Rather, the accommodation affords parity for a student who, because of a disability, requires additional time to read the test questions and responses. The law acknowledges that there may be situations when a requested academic accommodation is unreasonable. A specific accommodation is deemed unreasonable if the accommodation would result in an undue burden on the university or fundamentally alter the academic course or program requirements in which the student is enrolled. For example, an unreasonable accommodation request is to eliminate a course or program requirement such that it fundamentally alters the purpose of the course or program. A clear example of an unreasonable accommodation is a request to remove a clinical component of a health science program.
The Office for Civil Rights, OCR, at the U.S. Department of Education defines accessibility as meaning, quote, when a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability in an equally integrated and equally effective manner, with substantially equivalent ease and use, end quote. Basically, this definition reminds us that faculty are legally responsible to provide students with academic accommodations. In doing so, we are not providing an unfair advantage or making our courses easier for students who need academic accommodations. Rather, we are recognizing that some students require adaptation or accommodation to ensure the student has the same opportunity as anyone else to succeed or fail a course. Providing accommodations and addressing accessibility is not a free pass to get an A or pass the course. However, providing access to learning is the law and vital that students receive appropriate documented accommodations immediately and without delay to allow equal and fair access to course materials and learning opportunities afforded to other students who may not have a recognized or identified disability. Let's review an example shown on this slide, which shows people watching a soccer game. The image illustrates the concepts of equality, equity, justice, and liberation applied to three individuals watching the game. In the picture, we observe people presented with barriers and supports that impact the experience of watching a soccer game. When we offer specific accommodations required by a student, we achieve equity. When we consider our course materials and course design to meet the needs of a variety of students, we will achieve justice by removing causes on inequality, inequity, and making sure that courses are designed and taught without any systemic barriers to learning. Let's learn more. The Learning Access Program, or LAP, is Stockton's Student Disability Services Office. The Learning Access Program facilitates the student accommodation process. Employee accommodations for faculty and staff are facilitated by Human Resources and the Chief Officer for Diversity and Inclusion. Let's review how students receive documented accommodations. We will review the student accommodation process, typical accommodations utilized in the classroom, your responsibility as a faculty member to create accessible courses and track student accommodation requests, directions for utilizing the LAP Accommodated Test Center, and some of the technology you will see students using in the classroom.
Students who seek classroom accommodations while attending Stockton University must register with the Learning Access Program, also known as LAP. The process of registering with LAP and receiving an accommodation letter is outlined on this screen. If a student self-discloses a disability to you, but does not provide you with an accommodation letter from the Learning Access Program, please direct the student to contact LAP to schedule an intake appointment. To comply with laws and regulations, faculty should not provide unofficial accommodations to a student. Students should receive accommodations only after registering with LAP and presenting faculty with an official accommodation letter. Our process at Stockton requires students to contact the Learning Access Program to schedule an intake meeting. During the LAP intake meeting, the student and the coordinator review the student's disability documentation. The documentation identifies the student's diagnosis and functional limitations. Based on this information, the student and coordinator develop the student's accommodation plan, which is recorded as a letter of accommodation. The accommodations provided are designed to provide equal access for academic success while maintaining the academic standards of the program. At the conclusion of the meeting, students are provided with a letter of accommodation to electronically sign and email to their faculty. The Learning Access Program does not email letters of accommodation directly to faculty. Students are instructed to renew their accommodations electronically every semester. Accommodations are not retroactive and begin when the letter of accommodation is provided to the faculty member. This screen displays a sample letter of accommodation issued from the Learning Access Program, or LAP, to a student approved for academic accommodations. Students are responsible for emailing a PDF version of the letter of accommodation to their faculty members. This letter outlines the specific accommodations the student is entitled to in your course and applies to the classroom or an online course. The letter includes information regarding the accommodation, such as the LAP test scheduling process, a link to the test scheduling form, and the note-taking accommodation procedure. Faculty should provide students with information about the Learning Access Program in their course syllabi. A sample statement for inclusion on the syllabus is available on the LAP website or in the sample syllabus provided on the Center for Teaching and Learning Design, or CTLD, website. You may click on the resources link posted on the Stockton webpage used to access this video to view the syllabus statement.
Once a student presents the letter of accommodation to a faculty member, the faculty member is officially notified and is required to provide the specific accommodations for the student. To track accommodations, faculty are encouraged to develop and maintain a record for tracking letters of accommodation received from students in any or each course. Maintaining a record of your students' letters of accommodation will assist you in ensuring that accommodations, such as extra time on exams and quizzes, are applied to all exams and quizzes throughout the semester. It is the faculty member's responsibility to provide accommodations indicated in the letter of accommodation. It is not the responsibility of the student to remind a faculty member throughout the semester of the accommodations. This screen provides some ideas for maintaining a record of student accommodations, including creating a spreadsheet or using a grading system to indicate students with accommodations. The best method of record keeping will depend on the best way for you to remember information from any letters of accommodation you receive each semester. As discussed previously, a student's accommodation begins once the letter is received. You do not need to make the accommodation retroactive to any tests or assignments that were completed before the letter was received.
If a student is eligible for additional time during testing, the student is instructed to approach the faculty member to discuss and determine if the additional test time will be provided in the physical classroom. This will be dependent on the student's schedule, the faculty member's schedule, and classroom availability. If providing additional test time in the classroom is not possible, the student should utilize the LAP Test Center and is required to provide faculty with a testing accommodation scheduling form available on the LAP website. Generally, student testing should be completed in one location unless otherwise agreed upon prior to the test. Faculty should not have students start a test in the classroom and finish the extra time for the test in a faculty office or an alternate location unless the student agrees to this arrangement ahead of time. For any quizzes, tests, or exams given on Blackboard, faculty will add additional time for specific students in the Blackboard settings for the test. It is not the student's responsibility to remind a faculty member prior to an online test that the time must be adjusted. If you need assistance with adding time to a test in Blackboard, please contact the ITS Help Desk or the Center for Teaching and Learning Design. If a student's testing accommodation includes a distraction-reduced environment, the student may choose to take the test in the LAP Test Center or an alternate location offered by the faculty member and agreed upon by the student. Faculty members may not require students to take a test in the faculty member's office, a hallway, or a neighboring classroom if the student prefers to use the LAP Test Center as a distraction-reduced setting. To use the LAP Test Center, the student is responsible for meeting with the faculty member in advance of the exam to determine the requested day and time. Once they have met with the faculty, they will complete the test room booking request and schedule their testing appointment with LAP at least 48 hours in advance. The faculty member will provide LAP with the test proctoring instructions prior to the start of the exam. Please note that once a test is scheduled with LAP, students are not permitted to adjust the date and time for the test. If the date or time needs to be adjusted, faculty must contact the LAP. If needed, LAP is available to assist faculty members in determining if an alternate location will meet the needs of the student.
Students who receive note-taking services are still required to attend class. Some students may have an accommodation to use note-taking software. The student will use an electronic device such as a laptop, tablet, phone, or other device during class. In order to allow a student with a disability to use recording and at the same time protect the instructor, the institution requires the student to sign an agreement so as to not infringe on a potential copyright or to limit freedom of speech. The accommodation to use an electronic device will be indicated on the student's accommodation letter.
As discussed on the previous screen about note-taking, some student accommodations require students to use electronic devices in the classroom. In addition to note-taking, students use a variety of assistive technology tools provided by the Learning Access Program, including FM or personal amplification systems, SpellX Pocket Med Spelling Assistant, audiobooks, digital recorders, as well as laptops and tablets that assist with recording and note-taking. If a student has audiobooks included in a letter of accommodation, the Learning Access Program provides the audiobooks for the course. The faculty member does not need to obtain the audiobook for the student. If you have a policy about using electronic devices in class, please do not state that the use of electronics is only permitted for students with disabilities or accommodations. Doing so risks identifying the student's disability to others in the class. It is better to use a statement such as, "The use of electronic devices in class is prohibited without permission from the course instructor." To request the use of electronic devices in class, please discuss your needs with the instructor. This statement, or one like it, does not specifically identify the student in your course who uses technology as being a student with a disability. If you would like help writing a statement for your syllabus, contact LAP or the Center for Teaching and Learning Design. While we are discussing the syllabus, it is important to provide an accessibility statement in your syllabus. To assist faculty, the Learning Access Program created a sample accessibility statement for inclusion in the syllabus. This statement is available on the resources link posted on the Stockton webpage used to access this video, or by going to the Learning Access Program's Faculty and Staff Resources webpage, or in the sample syllabi offered on the Center for Teaching and Learning Design's website. If you need assistance with specific course accessibility issues, contact the Learning Access Program or the Center for Teaching and Learning Design.
Let's apply what we've learned so far to evaluate student scenarios related to complying with the ADA and other legislation and policies related to accessibility. We have 6 scenarios. A situation will be described, and you will consider what should occur in each scenario. For our first scenario, let's listen to a fictitious faculty colleague, Dr. Martha Jackson.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackson. When I give my exams, I want to be available to answer student questions and watch the students take the exam. A student provided me with an accommodation letter from the Learning Access Program that indicates the student will take the exam in the LAP Test Center. I prefer to put the student in my office, which is across from the hall from my classroom. I can proctor and check in with the student and answer her questions. However, the student prefers the LAP Test Center and finds it distracting to be in my office. May I insist that the student take the exam in my office?
Based on what you learned so far in this training, is Dr. Jackson justified in requiring the student to take the exam in her office? If you responded no, meaning that Dr. Jackson is not permitted to require the student to take the exam in her office, you are correct. Let's discuss this with Dr. Jackson.
I understand that the LAP Test Center provides students with a reduced distraction environment, which I can't provide in my faculty office, since it is located in a busy hallway and is sometimes used by another faculty member. It makes sense that my student needs a distraction-free environment to take the exam so that the exam represents what the student knows and is not unfairly impacted by being distracted by various stimuli in a test environment like my office. However, I did learn by talking to LAP that if the student and I agree to a location that is not the LAP test center, perhaps an empty classroom or other setting, the student may choose to use a location other than the LAP test center, if that location is mutually agreeable to me and the student. It is fine to offer testing in a mutually agreed upon location instead of my office or the LAP test center. For our second scenario, let's consider who is responsible for providing a student with extended time when taking a test. Let's hear what happened to a fictitious colleague, Dr. Luis Rodriguez.
I gave the first online exam to the students in my course at the beginning of October. A student with accommodations for extended test time provided me with the LAP accommodation letter in September. It's so hectic at the beginning of the semester, and I completely forgot about the accommodation. The student just emailed me after taking the exam to let me know the extended time wasn't provided. Isn't it the student's responsibility to remind me that he needs double time for the exam?
Is Dr. Rodriguez correct? Was it the student's responsibility to remind faculty of the extended test time accommodation? If you responded no, you are correct. As we learned previously, once the student provides the faculty member with a letter of accommodation, it is the faculty member's responsibility to provide the accommodations included in the letter. The student is not required to remind the faculty member prior to each online exam to adjust the student's test time in Blackboard. Dr. Rodriguez may speak to the LAP staff to determine what, if any, additional action is warranted to prevent the student from receiving a lower grade because the student did not have time needed to complete the exam. Remember, for in-person exams, the faculty member should have a conversation with the student to determine if the additional testing time will be provided in the physical classroom. This will be dependent on the student's schedule, the faculty's schedule, and classroom availability. If faculty are unable to provide the additional test time in the classroom, the student may be best served by using the LAP Test Center.
For our third scenario, let's listen to Dr. Anita Wong.
A week before classes begin, I am informed that I have a student enrolled in my course who is diagnosed with a hearing impairment. An important accommodation is that all of my course videos need to have closed captioning. I have about 30 video clips used throughout my course. How should I proceed?
On the screen, you'll note 3 possible responses to Dr. Wong. Based on what we've learned, what is the legally correct response to Dr. Wong's dilemma? Should she send her 30 video clips to URM to apply closed captioning? Response A. Should Dr. Wong make sure any videos she uses in class have closed captioning? Response B. Or is the student responsible to apply captions to the videos? Response C. The correct answer is B, no worries. All of my videos are captioned. The law requires all course materials to be accessible regardless of whether or not a student needing these accommodations is in your class. Remember, students continue to enroll during drop-add periods, and a student with accommodation needs may enroll in your course or make their accommodations known after the semester begins. It is the law that all course materials must be accessible. It is the faculty member's responsibility in selecting and creating materials to make sure the materials are accessible.
In our fourth scenario, Dr. Shah Almar received an accommodation that appears to be difficult to implement in his course. Let's listen to Dr. Almar.
I teach an advanced chemistry course. A student submitted an accommodation letter with some accommodations that I am not sure how to provide. For example, the student needs a distraction-free testing environment, and all of the exams in my class occur in the lab with students completing timed activities at various stations set up in the lab. The student needs to use Bunsen burners and other equipment. So how can this occur in another environment like the LAP Test Center? I am not sure if the accommodation applies to my class and how to best meet the students' needs. What should I do?
This is certainly a dilemma for Dr. Elmar, and it is obvious he wants to meet the students' needs. Of the choices provided on the screen, do you think A, B, or C represents the best option for Dr. Elmar? Option A has Dr. Elmar consulting with LAP. Option B has Dr. Elmar discussing his concerns with the student, and option C states that Dr. Elmar will deny this accommodation because it is not reasonable for the course. If you selected A, you are correct. Faculty members with questions regarding reasonable accommodations should contact the Learning Access Program to discuss the accommodation in question. When determining reasonable accommodations, LAP must facilitate the interactive process and consult with the faculty member and student before denying an accommodation. Let's hear how Dr. Elmar resolved this issue.
After meeting with LAP, we determined that once the chemistry lab exam was set up, my student could move through the lab activities before other students arrived, allowing him to work without distraction. It was a simple and easy way to provide the accommodation and not in any way compromise my exam. Professor Mary Chitwell teaches an historical literature course. Let's find out what Professor Chitwell's dilemma is regarding the use of accessible documents.
I teach an historical literature course and know the value of exposing students to primary sources. Unfortunately, many publications are out of print. I found a wonderful book from the 1900s and wanted to provide students with a chapter from the book. I photocopied the chapter and sent the photocopied pages to my computer so I would have a scanned electronic version of the chapter to share with students on Blackboard. However, when I placed the document on Blackboard, the Ally indicator was red, meaning the document had accessibility issues and would not be accessible to students using screen readers, a common modification used by students with visual issues and learning differences.
Okay, session participant, you probably know the problem with Professor Chitwell's technique for providing an accessible document. We learned that documents that are scanned become images or pictures and do not contain the characters or letters on the page that a screen reader can see and read. Professor Chitwell should try to locate an electronic copy of the book and provide a link to the accessible text to the students. There have been efforts to digitize older publications. If an accessible electronic copy is not available, the scanned PDF needs to be converted to either an OCR Acrobat file or a Word document. Please note that converting to Word is not always a clean transfer, and the document should be reviewed for accuracy. It is important that documents provided as course materials are accessible.
For our final scenario, let's consider what happened to Professor Joe Darby. Let's hear from Professor Darby.
A student in my biology course submitted an accommodation letter during week 10 of the semester. The student requested to retake 2 previous exams with the additional time indicated in her accommodation letter. Since the student has an accommodation letter indicating a need for extended time during tests, am I obligated to allow the student to retake the exams with time and a half as indicated in her accommodation letter?
Based on what we learned, is Professor Darby obligated to permit the student to retake the exams that occurred prior to week 10 when the accommodation letter was received? If you responded yes, that is an incorrect response. The correct response is no. Accommodation letters are not retroactive. The student is entitled to extended time for any exam, test, or quiz occurring after the letter is received by the faculty member. This may not be an uncommon occurrence. Students are permitted to register for accommodations at any time during the semester. Faculty members may not set a deadline as to when students must submit a letter of accommodation. However, accommodations are not retroactive. The accommodations begin when the faculty member receives the letter of accommodation. Therefore, students are not eligible to retake any previous exams or receive any other retroactive accommodations. Going through common scenarios helps us apply learning from this professional development session to student accommodation situations. As faculty, there are useful, accessible teaching practices we should employ to reduce concern about needing to significantly revise our course or materials to meet the needs of students with disabilities. We appreciate the need for accessible courses by reviewing this cartoon. Let me pause for 20 seconds to allow you to read this cartoon about shoveling the steps and ramp. From this cartoon, we appreciate that shoveling snow from the ramp before the steps would allow all students to get out of the cold and enter the school. Focusing on shoveling the steps first ensures that a student in a wheelchair will wait outside in the cold before having the ability to enter the school. This reminds us that addressing student accessibility issues in designing and delivering our course will result in an improved learning experience for all students. Making course materials accessible provides a student with an identified disability the opportunity to succeed in the course. It is not an added advantage, it is leveling the playing field. Let's consider another everyday example, an accommodation like a curb cut. A curb cut is the area of a sidewalk that is level with the street. A curb cut is designed to aid the mobility of a person using a wheelchair. However, others benefit from that accommodation, including a traveler with wheeled luggage, a caregiver pushing a stroller, an elderly man using a cane, an athlete with a cast who has difficulty lifting her leg the height of a full curb, a teenager using a skateboard. Everyone may benefit from the curb cut as an accommodation. In our courses, providing an audio transcript or closed captioning for a video not only assists a student who is deaf, but assists students with attention issues, students in noisy environments, students who speak English as a second language. Making course materials accessible and having accessible and flexible teaching practices benefits everyone, including faculty who do not need to perform major revisions to a planned course upon discovering a student with a disability is requesting accommodations. Let's take a few minutes to learn about accessible teaching practices. Accessible teaching practices refers to designing and delivering courses to be accessible and meet multiple student needs. In addition to meeting legal requirements for accessibility, a benefit of accessible teaching practices is an increased likelihood that all of our students will succeed in learning and achieving our course learning outcomes. In an accessible course, our course materials, learning outcomes, assignments, class interactions, communication, teaching resources, and teaching practices may be customized and adjusted to meet individual needs. This is the philosophy of a course design framework called Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. With UDL, students with disabilities, as well as those without disabilities, benefit from materials that are effective and easy to use. In planning and designing courses, it is important to provide plenty of support for students with accessible and easily available instructions in the syllabus, assignment guidelines, and/or on Blackboard or whichever site is being used for the course. Many students, not just students diagnosed with a learning disability, struggle with issues related to readiness to learn. Providing clear instructions with appropriate repetition benefits all students. Designing teaching based on multimodal teaching methods such as visual, auditory, and interactive activity is beneficial for all students and acknowledges different ways of learning. We've already discussed a variety of student accommodations. It is important to respect and make it easy for students to utilize accommodations in class, including use of assistive technology devices, alternate testing location, or other accommodations such as increased test time. Accommodations do not need to decrease the rigor or learning required for a course. Accommodations make learning possible. An accessible course requires faculty and students to create accessible materials when materials are to be shared with the class. For assistance with creating accessible PowerPoints, Word documents, and more, use available resources at Stockton such as Blackboard Ally and resources available from the Learning Access Program. Once accessible versions of our materials exist, we may use them each semester with little or no work required to adapt materials to meet various student needs. Another observable benefit of an accessible course is promoting student achievement. Having various options to meet the course learning outcomes empowers all students. In addition to accessible courses being the law, an accessible course is a hallmark of a faculty member following best practices in higher education. Many rubrics assessing teaching effectiveness and course quality focus on accessibility. A short video explaining how to get started with applying UDL to our courses is linked on the slide. Use Google or the Center for Teaching and Learning Design websites to learn more about universal design for learning. In addition to accessible course design and teaching methods, faculty must consider the accessibility of course materials selected and provided to students. Increased awareness and lawsuits related to accessibility has increased the number of educational resources that meet accessibility standards. Blackboard offers compliance with legal requirements for accessibility. When considering a textbook or software or other educational resource that is critical to a course, we may ask for Voluntary Product Accessibility Template, or VPAT. The VPAT is created by publishers and vendors to self-report product accessibility. Faculty should consider if textbooks required for the course have alternate versions to traditional print. PDFs, Word documents, and PowerPoint presentations should be reviewed to determine if they are easily accessible to students who use screen readers or other devices and strategies for printed materials. Remember, when we provide PDFs, they should never be scanned versions of an article or paper because a scanned version is considered an image and is not readable by a screen reader. Use the actual native PDF document. Do not scan a document to create a PDF. When providing images or tables, faculty should provide alternate text descriptions of the image or table. Videos should have closed captioning and/or audio transcripts. If you created a video without a script, posting the video on YouTube will offer an automatically created, closed captioned version. Many Microsoft products, such as Word, provide an accessibility checker that may be used to assist in creating accessible documents. There are many more tips for creating and selecting accessible course materials. Once again, you may contact the Learning Access Program or Center for Teaching and Learning Design for assistance in selecting or creating accessible course materials. Remember, the requirement to provide accessible materials applies to all faculty members and materials used in a course. If you do not think you have anyone in your class who requires accessible materials, students can transfer into classes through the add-drop period or present an accommodation letter at any time during the semester. Being prepared benefits everyone.
Faculty provide a variety of course learning materials to students, including Word and PDF documents, websites, podcasts, PowerPoints, and videos. These course materials must be accessible to students in a variety of disabilities, including visual and hearing impairments. It is a legal responsibility for faculty to provide students with accessible course materials. Although we will not discuss the accessibility of all content types in this session, we will discuss required document accessibility. Providing documents on Blackboard, even in a face-to-face class, is an excellent strategy to provide course materials to all students. By the first day of class, students should have access to the course syllabus and other important course materials. Placing these materials on Blackboard offers special advantages if a student with a disability is enrolled in your course. Using Blackboard at Stockton includes the use of Ally, a tool that scores and improves the accessibility of course documents. Ally will be discussed in more detail on our next screen. Students' Center for Teaching and Learning Design, or CTLD, provides sample syllabi on the CTLD website that are accessible and created based on best practices. The sample syllabi are downloadable for faculty use and are fully customizable to meet faculty and course needs, making it easier to offer students an accessible syllabus document. Having accessible documents available electronically on Blackboard affords an added benefit for students with visual impairments or learning differences who use a screen reader to view and read course documents.
One important problem to avoid with document accessibility is providing photocopied or scanned documents. We must avoid use of scanned PDFs, as once an article or text document is scanned, the document becomes an image or picture of the text and is unreadable by a screen reader. Faculty who use text-based materials, such as an excerpt from a book, article, or other text document handouts, should locate the electronic copy of the material and provide students with a direct link to the document. When creating your own handouts or documents, use the accessibility checker built into Microsoft products such as Word and PowerPoint to identify if your document is or is not accessible. These tips about document accessibility are important as all faculty are legally and ethically required to provide accessible materials for students in all classes, even if faculty are not aware of any students with accommodations. To review additional information about accessibility, go to the Learning Access Program's Faculty and Staff Resources webpage using the resources link posted on the Stockton webpage used to access this video. You will find information on how to convert documents, suggestions for the best font and color choices to use for students with visual impairments or learning disabilities, strategies to work with diverse students in the classroom, and information on upcoming and available past training opportunities. All Stockton courses are provided with a Blackboard course shell before the start of the semester. This includes courses with online and hybrid instruction. Faculty may copy a previous course or build new content in these Blackboard shells. Students enrolled in your course will see the Blackboard course starting the first day of the semester, even if there are no materials in the course. At minimum, it is recommended that faculty post the course syllabus on Blackboard by the first day of the class to provide all students with 24/7 access to this important course document. Posting a syllabus a week before the class begins and making the course available to students is a recommended best practice. A distinct advantage for students and faculty when placing materials on Blackboard is Ally. Ally is automatically available in Blackboard. Ally allows students and faculty to download accessible versions of documents posted for use in class. Once a faculty member uploads a document, such as the syllabus or a course handout, Ally will make the document available to students in a variety of formats, including a special format for students using Braille readers, an audio version, an HTML version that may perform better on a mobile device or screen reader, and more. Faculty do not need to do anything except upload the document. Ally will automatically convert the document. At institutions using Ally, it has been noted that use of alternate formats is not limited to students with disabilities. Both faculty and students benefit from alternate formats, such as having an audio version of a document during times when viewing the document is not practical, such as listening to an article while working out on a treadmill. For faculty, Blackboard Ally offers an indicator to alert faculty to accessibility issues with documents uploaded by the faculty member. If Ally detects that there may be accessibility issues with a document, it has built-in guidance for faculty describing how to improve the document's accessibility. To learn more about Ally, use the resources link posted on the Stockton webpage used to access this video. Contact the ITS Help Desk or the Center for Teaching and Learning Design. We have learned a lot in our time together today. We met our objectives to describe how the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, applies to teaching at Stockton University. We identified responsibilities to provide students with academic accommodations, described how students receive documented accommodations, evaluated student scenarios related to ADA, and identified teaching practices. Now we will wrap up by providing campus resources to improve accessibility and meet the needs of students with disabilities. We realize there are a lot of rules and regulations related to accessibility. However, Stockton offers faculty many resources to assist students with a variety of needs that go beyond course accessibility concerns. You are invited to learn more about the resources listed on this and the following screen and make appropriate referrals best suited to meet a student's unique needs. Please remember, if you have concerns about a student, academic or related to behavior or self-report of difficulty, you may use the Stockton Cares form available on the Dean of Students website to alert a professional who will recommend action as appropriate. The resources link posted on the Stockton webpage used to access this video provides hyperlinks to these resources.
We thank you for your time and interest in completing this training module. Please let us know if you have additional questions about faculty responsibilities in meeting student accessibility needs by reaching out to Dr. Valerie Hayes using the information provided on this screen. You may also contact Dr. Hayes to provide feedback on your training session. Links to resources mentioned throughout this training are accessible on the ADA 504 Steering Committee Resources website where this video is posted. Please recommend this training to a faculty colleague. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day.